The Kościuszko Uprising was an uprising against Imperial Russia and the Kingdom of Prussia led by Tadeusz Kościuszko in the Commonwealth of Poland, and the Prussian partition in 1794. It was a failed attempt to liberate Poland, Belarus and Lithuania from Russian influence after the Second Partition of Poland and the creation of the Targowica Confederation. Background: decline of the Commonwealth. By the early 18th century, the magnates of Poland and Lithuania controlled the state, or rather, they managed to ensure that no reforms would be carried out that might weaken the privileged status, through the abuse of the liberum veto rule, which enabled any deputy to paralyze the same proceedings. Deputies bribed by magnates or foreign powers, or those simply content to believe they were living in an unprecedented golden age, paralyzed the Commonwealth's government for over a century. The idea of reforming the Commonwealth gained traction since the mid-17th century. It was, however, viewed with suspicion not only by its magnates but also by neighboring countries, which had been content with the deterioration of the Commonwealth and abhorred the thought of a resurgent and democratic power on their borders. With the Commonwealth army reduced to around 16,000, it was easy for its neighbors to intervene directly. Attempts at reform. A major opportunity for reform presented itself during the Great Sejm of 1788–92. Poland's neighbors were preoccupied with wars and unable to intervene forcibly in Polish affairs. Russia and Austria were engaged in hostilities with the Ottoman Empire. The Russians also found themselves simultaneously fighting in the Russo-Swedish War, 1788–1790. A new alliance between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and Prussia seeming to provide security against Russian intervention, and on 3 May 1791 the new constitution was read and adopted to overwhelming popular support. With the wars between Turkey and Russia having ended, Empress Catherine was furious over the adoption of the document, which she believed threatened Russian influence in Poland. Russia had viewed Poland as a de facto protectorate. The worst possible news have arrived from Warsaw. The Polish king has become almost sovereign, was the reaction of one of Russia's chief foreign policy authors, Alexander Bezbarago, when he learned of the new constitution. Prussia was also strongly opposed to the new Polish constitution, and Polish diplomats received a note that the new constitution changed Polish state so much that Prussia did not consider its obligations binding. Just like Russia, Prussia was concerned that the newly strengthened Polish state could become a threat, and Prussian Foreign Minister Friedrich Wilhelm von Schulenburg-Kennet clearly and with rare candor told Poles that Prussia did not support the constitution and refused to help Commonwealth in any form, even as a mediator, as it was not in Prussia's state interest to see Commonwealth strengthened so that it could threaten Prussia in some future. The Prussian statesman Ewald von Herzberg expressed the fears of European conservatives. The Poles have given the coup de grace to the Prussian monarchy by voting a constitution, elaborating that a strong Commonwealth would likely demand the return of the lands Prussia acquired in the First Partition. Second Partition of Poland. The constitution was not adopted without dissent in the Commonwealth itself, either. Magnates who had opposed the constitution draft from the start, namely Franciszek Kołary-Branicki, Stanislaw Szczytny-Potocki, Suren Ruski, and Szymon and Joseph Kosakowski, asked Tsaritsa Catherine to intervene and restore their privileges, such as the Russian guaranteed cardinal laws abolished under the new statute. To that end, these magnates formed the Targowica Confederation. The Confederations Proclamation, prepared in St. Petersburg in January 1792, criticized the constitution for contributing to, in their own words, contagion of democratic ideas. Following the fatal examples set in Paris, it asserted that the parliament has broken all fundamental laws. swept away all liberties of the gentry, and on the 3rd of May 1791 turned into a revolution and a conspiracy. The Confederates declared an intention to overcome this revolution. "We can do nothing but turn trustingly to Tsarina Catherine, a distinguished and fair empress, our neighboring friend and ally, who respects the nation's need for well-being and always offers it a helping hand," they wrote. The Confederates aligned with Catherine and asked her for military intervention. On the 18th of May 1792, Russian ambassador to Poland, Yakov Bulgakov, delivered a declaration of war to the Polish foreign minister Joachim Kreptowicz. Russian armies entered Poland and Lithuania on the same day, starting the Polish-Russian War of 1792. The war ended without any decisive battles, with a capitulation signed by Polish King Stanislaw August Poniatowski, who hoped that a diplomatic compromise could be worked out. King Poniatowski's hopes that the capitulation would allow an acceptable diplomatic solution to be worked out were soon dashed. With new deputies bribed or intimidated by the Russian troops, a new session of parliament, known as the Grodno Sejm, took place, in fall 1793. On the 23rd of November 1793, it concluded its deliberations under duress, annulling the constitution and acceding to the second partition. Russia took 250,000 square kilometers, while Prussia took 58,000 square kilometers of the Commonwealth's territory. This event reduced Poland's population to only one-third of what it was before the partitions began in 1772. The rump state was garrisoned by Russian troops and its independence was strongly curtailed. Such an outcome was a giant blow for the members of Targowica Confederation, who saw their actions as a defense of centuries-old privileges of the magnates, but now were regarded by the majority of the Polish population as traitors. Growing unrest. The Polish military was widely dissatisfied with the capitulation, which most commanders considered premature. Tadeusz Kościuszko, Prince Joseph Poniatowski and many others would criticize the king's decision, and many, including Kościuszko, resigned their commission shortly afterward. After the Commonwealth defeat in that war and the rescinding of the constitution, the army was reduced to about 36,000. In 1794, Russians demanded a further downsizing of the army to 15,000. The dissent in the Polish army was one of the sparks that would lead to the coming conflict. The king's capitulation was a hard blow for Kościuszko, who had not lost a single battle in the campaign. By mid-September he was resigned to leave the country, and he departed Warsaw in early October. Kościuszko settled in Leipzig, where many other notable Polish commanders and politicians formed an émigré community. Soon he and some others began preparing an uprising against Russian rule in Poland. The politicians, grouped around Ignacy Potocki and Hugo Kołłątaj, sought contacts with similar opposition groups formed in Poland, and by spring 1793 had been joined by other politicians and revolutionaries, including Ignacy Jeleński. While Kołłątaj and others had begun planning for the uprising before meeting Kościuszko, his support was a major boon for them, as he was, at that time, among the most popular individuals in the entire Poland. In August 1793, Kościuszko returned to Leipzig, where he was met with demands to start planning for the uprising. However, he was worried that an uprising would have little chance against the three partitioners. In September he would clandestinely cross the Polish border to conduct personal observations, and to meet some sympathetic high-ranking officers in the remaining Polish army, including General Józef Wodecki. The preparations in Poland were slow, and he decided to postpone the outbreak, and left for Italy, planning to return in February. However, the situation in Poland was changing rapidly. The Russian and Prussian governments forced Poland to again disband the majority of her armed forces, and the reduced units were to be drafted to the Russian army. Also, in March, the Tsarist agents discovered the group of revolutionaries in Warsaw and started arresting notable Polish politicians and military commanders. Kosciuszko was forced to execute his plan earlier than planned, and on March 15, 1794 he set off for Kraków. On 12 March 1794, General Antoni Madaliński, the commander of 1st Greater Polish National Cavalry Brigade, decided to disobey the order to demobilize, advancing his troops from Ostroleka to Kraków. This sparked an outbreak of riots against Russian forces throughout the country. The Russian garrison of Kraków was ordered to leave the city and confront Madaliński, which left Kraków completely undefended, but also foiled Kościuszko's plan to seize their weapons. Uprising. On 24 March 1794, Tadeusz Kościuszko in the Kraków town square, a veteran of the American Revolutionary War, announced the general uprising and assumed the powers of the commander-in-chief of all of the Polish forces. He also vowed not to use these powers to oppress any person, but to defend the integrity of the borders of Poland, regain the independence of the nation, and to strengthen universal liberties. In order to strengthen the Polish forces, Kościuszko issued an act of mobilization, requiring that every 5 houses in Lesser Poland delegate at least one able male soldier equipped with carbine, pike, or an axe. Kościuszko's commission for order in Kraków recruited all males between 18 and 28 years of age and passed an income tax. The difficulties with providing enough armament for the mobilized troops made Kościuszko form large units composed of peasants armed with scythes, called the Scyther men. To destroy the still weak opposition, Russian Empress Catherine the Great ordered the corps of Major General Fyodor Denisov to attack Kraków. On 4 April both armies met near the village of Raklorica. In what became known as the Battle of Raklorica, Kościuszko's forces defeated the numerically and technically superior opponent. After the bloody battle, the Russian forces withdrew from the battlefield. Kościuszko's forces were too weak to start a successful pursuit and wiped the Russian forces out of Lesser Poland. Although the strategic importance of the victory was close to none, the news of the victory spread fast, and soon other parts of Poland joined the ranks of the revolutionaries. By early April the Polish forces concentrated in the lands of Lublin and Volhynia, ready to be sent to Russia, joined the ranks of Kościuszko's forces. On 17 April in Warsaw, the Russian attempt to arrest those suspected of supporting the insurrection and to disarm the weak Polish garrison of Warsaw under Gen. Stanislaw Mokranowski by seizing the arsenal at Miodowa Street resulted in an uprising against the Russian garrison of Warsaw, led by Jan Kalinski. In the face of indecisiveness of the King of Poland, Stanislaw II Augustus, the insurgents were aided by the incompetence of Russian ambassador-in-commander Joseph I. Jalstrom, and the fact that the chosen day was the Thursday of Holy Week, when many soldiers of the Russian garrison went to the churches for the Eucharist, not carrying their arms. Finally, from the onset of the insurrection, the Polish forces were aided by the civilian population and had surprise on their side as they attacked many separate groups of soldiers at the same time, and the resistance to Russian forces quickly spread over the city. After 2 days of heavy fighting, the Russians, who suffered between 2,000 to 4,000 casualties out of an initial 5,000-strong garrison, were forced to leave the city. A similar uprising was started by Jakub Jasinski in Vilnius on 23 April, and soon other cities and towns followed. The massacre of unarmed Russian soldiers attending the Easter service was regarded as a crime against humanity by Russians and was an argument for a vengeance later. During Siege of Warsaw, on 7 May 1794, Kościuszko issued an act that became known as the Proclamation of Polonice, in which he partially abolished serfdom in Poland, granted civil liberty to all peasants, and provided them with state help against the abuses by the nobility. Although the new law never fully came into being and was boycotted by much of the nobility, it also attracted many peasants to the ranks of the revolutionists. It was the first time in Polish history when the peasants were officially regarded as part of the nation, the word being previously equal to nobility. Despite the promise of reforms and quick recruitment of new forces, the strategic situation of the Polish forces was still critical. Although they consisted of 6,000 peasants, cavalry, and 9,000 soldiers, on 10 May the forces of Prussia, 17,500 soldiers under General Francis Favorat, crossed the Polish borders and joined the 9,000 Russian soldiers operating in northern Poland. On 6 June Kościuszko was defeated in the Battle of Świętokrzyski by a joint Russo-Prussian force, and on 8 June General Józef Zajaczek was defeated in the Battle of Chelm. Polish forces withdrew towards Warsaw and started to fortify the city under directions from Kościuszko and his 16,000 soldiers, 18,000 peasants and 15,000 burghers. On 15 June the Prussian army captured Kraków unopposed. Warsaw was besieged by 41,000 Russians under General Ivan Ferzan and 25,000 Prussians under King Frederick William II of Prussia on 13 July. On 20 August, an uprising in Greater Poland started and the Prussians were forced to withdraw their forces from Warsaw. The siege was lifted by 6 September when the Prussians and Russians had both withdrawn their troops. Although the opposition in Lithuania was crushed by Russian forces, the uprising in Greater Poland achieved some success. A Polish corps under Jan Henryk Dąbrowski captured Bydgoszcz and entered Pomerania almost unopposed. Thanks to the mobility of his forces, General Dąbrowski evaded being encircled by a much less mobile Prussian army and disrupted the Prussian lines, forcing the Prussians to withdraw most of their forces from central Poland. However, the Poles did not stay long in Prussian territories, and soon retreated to central Poland. Meanwhile, the Russians equipped a new corps commanded by General Alexander Suvorov and ordered it to join up with the corps under Ivan Ferzan near Warsaw. After the Battle of Krupica and Tiraspol, the new army started its march towards the Polish capital. Trying to prevent both Russian armies from joining up, Kościuszko mobilized 2 regiments from Warsaw and with General Sierakowski's 5,000 soldiers, engaged Ferzan's force of 14,000 on 10 October in the Battle of Maciejowice. Kościuszko himself was wounded in the battle and was captured by the Russians, who sent him to St. Petersburg. The new commander of the uprising, Tomasz Wawrzecki, was not able to control the spreading internal struggles for power, and ultimately became only the commander of weakened military forces, while the political power was held by General Józef Zajaczek, who in turn had to struggle with both the leftist liberal Polish Jacobins and the rightist and monarchical nobility. On 4 November the joint Russian forces started the Battle of Prager, the right-bank suburb of Warsaw. After 4 hours of long hand-to-hand struggle, the 22,000-men strong Russian forces broke through the Polish defenses and Suvorov allowed his Cossacks to loot and burn Warsaw. Approximately 20,000 were murdered in the Prager massacre. A wounded Zajaczek fled, abandoning the Polish army. On 16 November, near Radożyce, Wawrzecki surrendered. This marked the end of the uprising. The power of Poland was broken, and the following year the Third Partition of Poland happened, after which Austria, Russia and Prussia annexed the remainder of the country.